Now we have Delanie Cutsforth. Delanie is from Region 3, and she is a senior hydraulics engineer. So please welcome Delanie.
Good morning. As she said, my name's Delanie. I'm going to talk to you about hydraulics today. I'm the senior hydraulic engineer in Region 3. I've been doing hydraulics for ODOT for about 9 years. Before that, I did roadway for about 5 years. So all in the White City Tech Center. In terms of ODOT hydraulics as a whole, there's only a few hydro people in each region, as you probably know, and then we have a few people in Salem, but we definitely have a role on most, if not all, projects. So having us on your project team is pretty important. So one of the things, or some of the things I'm going to talk about today, just hydraulics in general, a little overview of what is hydro. It's basically your water on your project. So stormwater, streams, any of that kind of stuff on your project is what we're dealing with either during construction or just getting the water through the project as far as like fish passage or something. I'm going to talk a little bit about like our day-to-day tasks, and some of us within hydro have more specific specialties that we have across the different regions, and so we're trying to work more on cross-sharing some of those abilities. So you might end up with somebody on your project that's not from your region in the future, kind of like Bridge is doing now, that same sort of thing. So you might be seeing people that maybe aren't from your region, and that could be because they have a specialty in a certain area that you need for your project. So you'll be getting that information through your lead hydro in your region. So I'll be talking to you a little bit about design standards and regulations, and things like FEMA regulations. I'm going to talk to you about the timing of the deliverables and project delivery and how those relate to the new racetrack. And I'll be reviewing some of the fatal flaws that could hinder the project, and then tell you about a few of the programs that are housed within hydro and the TLC and who your lead contacts are in the regions. So research. So a lot of our work is based on research in hydro. We do the vast majority of our design and research before DAP and even before scoping sometimes. We collect information on our soils and rainfall, stream flows, existing drainage patterns, FEMA floodways. We might be analyzing the stream bed materials or the condition of the existing culverts especially. We might be looking for evidence of scour or things like what the impacts would be of widening on a project. Even if it's just something like widening a couple feet to add some guardrail or something. It doesn't have to be a significant, like a new lane or anything like that. Your hydro person will be finding most of this information on their own, but they might need your support to obtain some of it. So what that would be is you would be facilitating them through like having meetings, setting up meetings maybe between different disciplines, or just in the general project meeting, bringing up things for them that we might need to discuss as a team. And then also through maybe scheduling some site visits between different disciplines. That might also include maintenance, because a lot of times we forget that maintenance is dealing with the water all the time, and they're a really good resource for us, so it's good to keep them in the loop. I don't know about the other regions, but in Region 3, they're kind of hit and miss in project meetings, and so sometimes they just miss something about the project that we're going to be adding a pond, or that we're something in the project that maybe they could have be a good resource for us for. And it might be something that either through the scoping process or early on that we need to add, like maybe there's a culvert that they've been having issues with for years, but we're just doing like a 1R paving project or even a 3R or something, and nobody recognized that during scoping, and so it might be something that we need to add in during the project. So keeping them in the loop is really helpful. So as we get through with our research, we move on to design, of course. And for hydraulics, our designs are governed not only by our ODOT standards and our hydraulics manual, but also the majority of our work is governed by our permit regulations. So we work hand in hand with our environmental permit specialists and our recs in the region so that we can meet the regulations that are set forth by ODFW or National Marine Fisheries or DEQ or whoever the agency might be. So what are we designing? We're designing things like detention and retention ponds and water quality facilities. So this could be things like swales or combos of swales and ponds, things like that that are going to meet our permit requirements for stormwater runoff. So the water that's running off the road as opposed to water in a stream. Typically, we prefer to do swales and ponds in most of the regions versus like a filtera or a proprietary structure that's made by a company. This is just because those structures are really expensive and they're really high maintenance. But I recognize that in urban areas, like maybe in Region 1, those are probably a little more common just because we have less right-of-way to work with. I mean, that's really the defining factor, is if we can get right-of-way or build something within our right-of-way, then absolutely that's what we're gonna choose first as far as a swale versus one of those proprietary structures. We also do stream restorations, so this could be converting a culvert or some kind of like a metal or a box culvert into a larger one or into a bridge where we're restoring the channel through it and allowing for fish passage. That could include things like roughened chutes, which are at the outlet of the culvert, bringing the stream back up to its original grade through rebuilding the channel. We might be reclaiming stream banks or other areas that have been scoured out, or be doing scour protection design for a bridge through the addition of like large rock like riprap. We also deal with temporary water management, which is what we're gonna do with a stream or a waterway or irrigation during the project. So, and irrigation is something that sometimes on projects we don't always identify really well. Maybe we don't know about it, or it's just something that we don't want to be surprised by later in the project. So if you know that there's irrigation water somewhere even near the project, then it's good to make sure that your hydro also knows about that. Some other things that we work on are bridge and large culvert hydraulic studies. So this is a big time amount for us. So we have to do studies on rivers and streams to make sure that not only that the bridges and the culverts are large enough to take the amount of water that we want to put through them, or that is coming through them from the stream, but also we have to deal a lot with FEMA and getting permits from them. And so those come through the local jurisdictions. So they all have the same rules, but each of their administrators interpret those rules a little bit differently. So what might work in one county might not work in another to a certain extent. Like they just might be more nitpicky in one place than in the other. Like in our region, the city of Roseburg has a really 5-star rating or something, I don't know what it's called, but with FEMA, where they're exceptionally strict because that has gotten their local landowners lower rates for their flood protection, for their insurance, and so they're very strict on their policies. So it just makes it so we might have to do more documentation on our end to satisfy what they're looking for in the local jurisdictions. And along with FEMA requirements, one of the things that we're also trying to do is if something is in a FEMA regulated floodway, even if it's like a 1R paving project, we're gonna have to get a floodplain development permit, and we're gonna have to, along with that, have a no rise, which means in most everything, it just means no change in the flood elevation. So the study that we're gonna have to do along with that just needs to support that we're not having a rise, so that takes time on our part to be able to get that result. And sometimes it's time waiting for FEMA. Like I requested information from FEMA recently, And usually it takes them a couple of weeks to get that to us just so we can do our study. And it took like 6 weeks the last time. So it's not always something that's under our control on timing of, I mean, we'll try early to get that information, but sometimes it is what it is. And one of the other things that we're designing are stormwater conveyance designs. So inlets, manholes, pipe networks, things like that. It kind of depends on the region, on who does that. Sometimes it's roadway and sometimes it's hydro. So based on this variety in designs, we're needed on most projects. The only ones that we're usually not needed on are 1Rs, like paving over paving projects, as long as there's not any widening. Pretty much will be needed on anything else. And it's good to have us on your project team, even if we don't anticipate having any design function, just because the team might start going in a direction where maybe they're gonna make a decision to add some guardrails somewhere, and if we don't catch that pretty early, it could have impacts later where all of a sudden we find out that we have to do stormwater late in the process. Stormwater treatment, and so all of a sudden we have to add a swale or a structure or something, and here we are at advanced plans and we don't have right of way or whatever. So that way, if we're on the team, then we can help you at least be informed of which way it could go. So what are our major deliverables? Of course, design, like our design, our plan, specs, and estimate. But then we also develop hydraulic and stormwater reports. In our new QC process, we're backing up and trying to get more information to the other disciplines earlier in the process. So we're going to be having where we have a draft report by DAP for the other disciplines. So that way we can just make sure that everybody's making the informed decisions on the project together. We also do a lot of exhibits and supporting data for the permitting. So this might be maps and diagrams other than the plans that we provide to the permit specialists. So it's really important that we're working closely with them to make sure that we know what the permit requirements are and then can help them with the documentation on that. And then we also have documentation for the FEMA regulations. So we might have to produce another report for them that just has the information that they need for that permitting. So we really do a lot in the background. Even if we only have a few plan sheets in the plans, we might be supporting a lot of different roles with our job. And then the other thing that we produce toward the end of the project that goes in the PS&E packet is the O&M manual. If we have any stormwater facilities, those all have a DFI number. That's just a drainage facility number that goes along with them. That should have been requested by the hydro, so that's not on you guys, but that O&M manual needs to be in the PS&E packet. It's part of that. So, and that just tells maintenance how to maintain the facility, whether it's mowing or cleaning or whatever. So timing. So what do I need from you? During scoping, I need complete information from the project sponsor on the scope of the project. So, I mean, that seems kind of obvious, but it seems like about half of the time we don't have a really clear focus even when we go to the field on what the project is supposed to be. They just say, well, we want to have some chain up areas in this stretch of roadway or something. You know, I mean, we just need very specific information. We need adequate time to scope if we're still delivering our STIP projects in the meantime, or we need time to push out our other projects so that we can focus on scoping and do a better job for you guys. I really appreciate when we have meetings at the start of the scoping project and just go through all of the different areas, and then during scoping, before everything's due, just to make sure the initial scope hasn't changed. I've had it on a project where roadway didn't anticipate any widening, but then once they did truck turning movements, they had to do some widening, and it was a project that I wouldn't have otherwise had anything on as far as scoping, so I already thought I was done. And then we ended up having to just add something in for stormwater. So it's not necessarily a big deal, but to add those things in, we just don't necessarily know about them if we don't get together as a team, as a scoping team, and talk about them. And then from kickoff through DAP, if before kickoffs, it's really helpful to know for your lead hydros, like what kickoffs are coming, maybe in the coming months, so that we can have a little bit of time to get prepared for that. We need to go back and look through our notes and go back through the scoping notes and make sure we have everything that we need to come to that kickoff prepared so that we can be a valuable member for you guys. And along with that comes links to the scoping documents, so we might need links from you guys. After kickoff, we need a well-defined scope that's based on the budget that came with the project. So if that has changed from what we scoped, it's just really helpful for the team for us to know that. It's helpful if you guys conduct your team meetings at regular, or check-ins at a regular interval and not just like when the plans are due. And that's commensurate with the complexity of the project, obviously. So if we have a really complex project, if you guys are holding, even if it's just a half an hour check-in, just from disciplines, sometimes as engineers we're really bad at talking to each other, and it doesn't happen until we're in the meeting. For whatever reason, pretty much every meeting, somebody brings something up that someone else didn't know about. So, and if the only meeting that we're in is just plans review, those things don't always come up. So it's good to have regular check-ins. If there is a change to the project scope, even if it seems minor, it seems like it really helps if there's an email sent out to the whole team, whether it's from the person who's doing the changing or if it comes from you guys. So if you can help keep that, like even if it's something like, okay, well, we decided that we're changing this driveway, or we've had a project where we were trying to coordinate with having a weigh scale as part of the project, and then it was out, and then it was in, and we weren't necessarily always being informed of that and what the updates were on it. So it's really helpful if you just keep everybody updated, because that can, even if you think it only applies to roadway or something, it could have an effect on ours, and it seems like we aren't always in the loop. So it'd be helpful to be in the loop all the time. And then as we go into our new QC process, we'll have our checklist, and if you can just, I don't know what your role is going to be in that. It's not something that we expect you guys to do any QC on, but if you can just check everybody that we are completing those, I think we have in Region 3, we have a expectation that those will be done 100% of the time. And so your support of that is really helpful. Just making sure that if somebody hasn't done their checklist, hold them to it. Like, make them accountable for it, because it helps the project as a whole. And then the only other thing later in the project that I might need from you is a letter of public interest finding. If we're using one of those like Filterra structures or something like that, and we have a sole source for it, so there aren't very many of those type of facilities available. So we might have to have you guys send out that letter for us. So what are the fatal flaws? Getting survey data on time, which means at kickoff, making sure they have time in their schedule to actually do the survey, but then we need it. A lot of the projects, especially Fish Passage, we're the first person that really needs to set things up. Bridge can't do their job, and Geo can't do their job if they don't know what the new stream alignment's going to be and where the slopes are going to catch and so forth. Floodplain permitting could be a huge project delivery stopper. So if for some reason we think there's going to be something unusual in the project, like we're adding a bunch of fill for a bridge abutment or something, we need to do those studies early and get our information into the floodplain administrators early, because their reviews can be 6 months easily, like just by statute. And then if we have to send it off federally because there is a rise for a map revision, it could take longer. And then, of course, communication between all the designers. Between us and environmental and geo and hydro, we just have to keep open lines of communication. I talk daily with our permit specialists and our recs. And I know that isn't necessarily all the case in all the regions, but that's what we're trying to get to, is keeping everybody on the same page. And let me see, where are we at? I'm almost out of time. And then fatal flaw could be not having a clearly defined scope on the project early on. We received a project not too long ago where we got money to fix a bunch of culverts. That's basically what it said on I-5 in Region 3, fix culverts. It's been such a nightmare because it takes a lot of time to figure out which culverts we're gonna do. I mean, that's like, here's 1,000 culverts, pick 18 that are the best. So filtering out the list and then doing the field investigations and then maintenance going out to clean the culverts and then going back out and looking at the culverts again. And we still haven't kicked the project off. So it's just been a huge delay in the kickoff of the project. So if you guys see a fatal flaw when you're looking through, looking at kicking something off and it doesn't have a clearly defined scope, then yes, definitely raise that flag and let's get it figured out early in the process. Hydro houses major culvert maintenance, stormwater, and the culvert inventory and maintenance program. Those are all ran, of course, out of the TLC. And we also have currently Ed Fulton, but he's almost ready to retire, in bridge hydraulics. So we have a few folks in Salem, and then in your regions 1 through 4, we have senior hydraulic engineers. And in Region 5, we have Matt, who's also a hydraulic engineer. And whoever your senior is, if you don't know who is your resource for your project, or even if you just need to consult on, hey, if we do this with the project, what's it gonna mean? Then just go to your senior hydro and they'll take care of you. So, and I think that's it.
Your mic on. Oh, there we go. One quick question over here.
Thank you. Is it on? So I have a question about how the culverts work. Like you mentioned a project where there's money for a bunch of culverts along a highway, and I'm sure Region 3 is the only one doing it. It's not Region 4. But if we did do it, do you have like a list of culverts maybe that we go out and look at regularly? When Bridge talked to us, they talked about how they go to every bridge. It seems kind of impossible with culverts.
So there has been a huge effort over the last few years that Rob Trevis's program has been doing to collect data on all the culverts in the state so that we have a database. Honestly, it's been kind of hit and miss. So there's sometimes that we just don't have as-built, so they don't find culverts that are out there. But then also the crews do a good job getting that information, but they're all temps during the summer. And so sometimes there's just less consistency than we'd like to see. So even though I can sort that list of, say, 200 culverts for the ones that are the worst, it doesn't, there's stuff that they miss because they just don't have a tuned eye to what the problems might really be. I mean, they've been trained over a few weeks or whatever to look for certain things, but it's been more often than not that maybe their rating says that we're okay, but then I find something even just in the pictures that looks concerning. And so I mean, there's a certain amount of help that helps us, that could help us during a meeting even get a quick answer, like, hey, are there a few, how many do we think there are? And then we can kind of use that as a jumping off point for the project, I guess.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Anyone have a burning question for Delanie? There's time. Aha. Thank you, Kim.
On a project, I think the stormwater guy talked about credits. Can you explain a bit more about that?
For stormwater?
Yeah.
So that's something that's kind of new that it's my understanding that it's not like an official stormwater credit project unless you're in Region 1 where we actually have the regional facility for stormwater. But basically the credit program is if if we have a project and the stormwater that's running into the project, maybe we're at an interchange of two highways, and the stormwater that comes in comes from another portion of our highway or another road, but it's not part of our project area. We can get credit for treating that water, and we can kind of trade it for maybe not being able to treat somewhere else. So that's something you have to work with your permits person. That's really our go-to, is your rec and your permits people. But then also Cash Cheslett, he has a database of that. So if your permits people don't know about that, he is their resource to try to figure out if there is something that already exists as far as credits that maybe the different people in different regions didn't know about. Is that where you were kind of? Okay, good.
Okay, real short question. Okay, Delanie, thank
All
you
right,
so
thanks.
much. So appreciate it.